Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Better Satellite World, the podcast of Space and Satellite Professionals International. I'm Lou Zaccarella. This series is underwritten with the generous support of Isotropic Systems, designers of the world's first multi-service high-throughput terminals, isotropicsystems.com. In 2015, 4 students from the University of Toronto spent about a year hopping between empty libraries, coffee shops, and a very small apartment to show up at pitch competitions. They were able to score $75,000 in startup capital and thus began the launch of Kepler Communications. Backed by a group of investors, Kepler has a big-time goal: to build an in-space telecommunications network through consistent deployment of products. What does that even mean, and what link are they trying to make for our industry? Well, let's ask their CEO. Mina Mitry is here. He's a friend who is known for scaling disruptive companies. Mina led Kepler to design, build, and launch its first satellite in a mere 12 months. For this, Kepler was named one of the world's most innovative ideas by Fast Company. Mina, welcome.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Well, let's talk vision first. Last time you and I were together down in Houston, you said that you were on a mission to build the internet in space. So, again, why? What does that look like, and why is it important for the next stage of commercial space development in our industry, human evolution, and some of the ideas that you've been working on since your student days?
Yeah, so I appreciate you starting out with the vision, and I think that's what always helped us to chart the roadmap to where we are today. Fundamentally, we've seen this shift where space is just becoming more economic. There's a resurgence in the use of space, which was formerly long held by national governments. And we're working towards a final frontier economy that's going to be born out in space. But instrumental in what we've observed here on Earth is that connectivity is key to building most economies. And so on that basis, we wanted to mimic it to enable the space economy.
Yeah, exactly. We always talk about the broadband economy, right? And connectivity is the new railroad. It is the new infrastructure. Maybe not quite as simple, but you're absolutely right. Let's get the pandemic out of the way. How has that affected Kepler's activities, and to what degree has it slowed you down?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say that my heart goes out to all the businesses that have been dramatically and negatively affected by the pandemic. It's been critical and unfortunate that we've dealt with it in the way we have to date. But I hope that we'll see a strong recovery for those businesses that have been affected. On the Kepler side, we're a little bit more fortunate to say. We've seen the pandemic actually as an upside. And I'm not sure if there's this common nomenclature, but we never want to waste a good pandemic. And
Okay. We do want to get rid of it, but we don't want to waste the opportunities. Yes.
You got it. So in that light, there's been both positive and negative developments. Net positive, I would say. So on the downside, we've really seen launch delays as a big hindrance to our business plan and our operation. Everything from the French Guiana base being shut down to other international travel that's been restricted has limited our ability to put assets in orbit. Mm-hmm. But on the bright side, we've seen a lot of good things. We've seen an influx of talent into the space market, people looking for new opportunities that we've been able to find homes with here at Kepler. We've seen new sources of government capital that weren't earlier part of our business plan or our planned operation. But I think most importantly, we've seen a shakeup where people that were very keen on seeing our service get delivered out of an abundance of care accelerated their work with us to sign on board our network. And those that were frankly kicking the tires fell away quite quickly and helped us to refocus our efforts.
That's interesting. Because we hear this in other areas of the industry, that some of the plans and ideas that had been kicking around for a while that now makes sense because connectivity is going to actually be looked at differently, but as even more critical, are moving forward. Before I ask you a little bit about the launch agreement that you guys just signed, is that what you're seeing? Are there people out there that you were talking to for a long time who said, look, now's the time to move this idea forward? We think this is going to make our business model, in other words, makes a lot more sense now than it did even pre-pandemic.
Yeah, you got it, Lou. So connectivity was always known as critical infrastructure and a necessity for a lot of things that we do today. But now even more so as businesses accelerate their move towards digitization and a pronounced need for that kind of infrastructure to support all their digital work has come front and center for us.
Yeah. When I met you in the fall of 2018, we were down at Spacecom Expo in Houston. You were down doing a panel and I was moderating. You had earlier that year, I believe, launched a 3U CubeSat, KIPP, which achieved, as I recall, the highest data rate ever in a nano satellite. You announced the launch agreement with Exo Launch over in Germany. Tell us about sort of what's happened between that time in Houston when we talked about the nano satellite and what's going to happen once that Soyuz rocket sprinkles you guys up in space.
Yeah, for sure. So the first few satellites we put up into the network were early technology demonstration, proving our radio hardware, equipment, communications protocols. And we've seen a lot of great success with them. Now, the next few satellites are putting our service into high gear and turning on service delivery and its operation.
So the XL CubeSat satellites were built by University of Toronto. Now, going forward, you're planning to build, I think, about 140 CubeSats in-house instead of ordering them from a manufacturing firm. So, I mean, how many people in your total team, are actually working on building the satellites? Because I think you've got about 50 or 60 employees now, right?
Yeah, we're up to about 65 people on the team now.
Oh, good.
And maybe a slight correction there, Lou. So the University of Toronto is a technology partner, but they're not producing the spacecraft.
Oh, okay.
So they're helping us with early phase design and the first test article production, first flight article production, and then the transfer of all that technology is coming into Kepler, and we're doing the production in-house.
Very good. And again, how many people do you have actually building satellites? Because there's a certain efficiency there that you guys have accomplished that everybody sort of talks about. It's one of the buzz items. You're not using a lot of people, right?
No, so it's about 5% of our team that is being put to work on the build and deployment of our satellites. Happy to talk about that in a little bit more detail, Lou.
Yeah. Well, again, I just, from a business model point of view, I mean, what kind of efficiencies does that allow you to do as you achieve your mission of, as you say, incrementally deploying technologies and products, into your business, onto your space platform?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we encountered early on when we were looking to procure a supply chain, if you will, for the production of our spacecraft is recognizing, one, the current maturity of that supply chain, and two, the lag time between, say, initial procurement to delivery of product. And within that period, you really lacked all control of the development timeline. You lacked control of when you can turn on or slow down production in response to market demands and pandemics in the same vein of thought. And to solve that problem, we went out, surveyed the market, and looked for efficient paths towards putting our network together. And what really came out of it is a model where we were able to partner with long-standing, well-known institutions that have decades of flight heritage, inherit a lot of their technology that's been used in many, many missions, and focus our limited production team on industrializing that technology, making it producible at scale, where for the most part, our team does assembly, integration, and test. And we use a number of contract manufacturers for things like metal machining or circuit board manufacturing. That's what allows us to keep the team size small, gain the process efficiency, but most importantly, we get the benefit of decades in flight heritage that our partners have had.
Yeah. So obviously the experience is out there. Really, it's up to you to sort of put the orchestra together to get them to play, right? And you're able to go out there and do that. I want to skip now. I want to sort of focus a little bit on the market. The cost to entry for doing what you do is probably less than in the traditional side of the business, which means, of course, you're going to get more players, probably more competitors, and I'm sure you've accommodated that in your planning. But the 5G rollout on the ground and the explosion of IoT in general does suggest to a lot of observers that there are a lot of opportunities out there. Talk to me a little bit about, again, your vision of what happens at Kepler as 5G rolls out, and your view of why IoT is important and what Kepler can accomplish for industries and organizations and even, public sector entities that are increasingly using IoT for managing water supplies in cities and all these, again, things that are inherent to our culture and our civilization continuing to move forward.
That's a great point, Lou, really bringing 5G front and center. And what we've understood and what we know today from 5G, it looks at the convergence between satellite and cellular, or satellite and other terrestrial technologies, which is really core to its rollout and the widespread use of connectivity around the world.
Yeah.
And for our vision in the markets that we tackle, we sort of describe this in a good amount of detail on our website and various media, that we have an incremental model, making sure that the technology we deploy sees adoption here on Earth so that we can sustainably build towards our future vision of connectivity outside of Earth. And in that model, we tackle market opportunities incrementally that make good business sense. So the first market really we've tackled with our early services and the few spacecraft we've have on orbit, we call it Global Data Service. That product goes out and is able to use existing off-the-shelf VSATs and is backwards compatible with what most maritime users have already on chip. They're able to rapidly deploy with a few software updates and get access to a large amount of data volume that they otherwise wouldn't be able to put on satellite networks. It removes a significant barrier to entry for these initial clients. They don't have to think about user terminal economics or hardware switching costs, and they're able to onboard our network. And under that same vein, they want to do that because of all the digital infrastructure they're deploying on board.
Right.
Whether it's a seismic vessel that's collecting more data, or someone conducting a GIS survey, just the sheer volume of digital information that's being collected in now these maritime platforms creates this unrelenting need for connectivity that today is not fulfilled by satellite.
Right. So we're back to connectivity again. One of the things that we wanted to talk about here, because the series is called Closing the Link, and our friends at Isotropic Systems are underwriting this because they're a big part of this with their advanced technology is our antennas and ground segment requirements. They are certainly different than they were when we were just a geo regime, right, carrying video signal around. Those are definitely the old days. Let's talk about antennas and ground segment requirements. I mean, what are the different requirements today to make these levels of connectivity and again, the incremental platforms, incremental product sets that you're putting out there possible? Do you have everything you need from the ground segment, or is there a ways to go before you guys are able to fulfill the entire mission?
Certainly the ground segment needs a lot of attention. And what I would say is it's aligned with our incremental approach. where today we've got a sufficient set of ground network partners that are building their antennas to be compatible on our network, and they're able to readily support our service so that we can maintain that backward compatibility, enabling enterprise to sign on to our network with limited effort. And as we look forward to really grow the adoption, the use of our services in a variety of applications, we do want to see out on the market the ability for low-cost steerable antennas. And that will be a critical driver to find our products into more mass market adoption.
Sure. I think that's a very good answer for that. Last question. You're old enough now to be looked at by students and young entrepreneurs as someone to be admired. So now you're going to be looked at as, how does he think of that? How did he come up with that? Why does he do that? You're going to be one of those guys. You're going to get second guessed, like a hockey player or quarterback or whatever. I don't say politician, but the incremental approach. Can you just take me through briefly why you arrived at that, what that means, and if there were models out there or mentors for yourself that you said, I like this. I'm not going to go out there with this fixed, sort of product and just drive it into the market and hope the market responds through good marketing and the needs. I'm going to go incrementally. What does that actually mean, and how did you arrive at that approach?
At the core of it, we really didn't start with that being our assumption. And I don't know if I'm old enough for people to look up to me just quite yet, but we'll let the story of Kepler work its way through the years and see if that becomes the case. And so in early days of Kepler and the work that we were doing as 4 young early university students, we had this insatiable need for learning and didn't take anything as granted. It's one of the benefits in taking a fresh look on an industry where you've not traditionally participated. Right. So to really learn what's been the history and what's worked, what hasn't worked, we started out by interviewing people across the world that have built satellite businesses before. What did it take to get off the ground? What were their major pitfalls? And time again, we heard the same resounding point of feedback. We started out with this grand vision. The scale of our network required before we started to see user adoption was pretty substantial. And in that process, we recognized that our cost of network just grew with time, and the actual user demand started to shrink for the services we initially projected to offer out into the market, because things change in real time as terrestrial coverage grows, as new connectivity means are built out to fill the gaps in the connectivity fabric we have today. So learning that from the market and the variety of people who were so generous to donate their time, allow us to interview them, learning from the early days of Teledesic to the early days of Orbcomm or Globalstar and the like, we decided we didn't want to repeat some of those main mistakes where a mentality of if you build it, they will come would not be successful in the present day market, even though we've seen a shift in growth and demand for connectivity. And that's what led us down the path of, hey, a possible solution here for us is to build it incrementally, making sure we tackle markets along the path of growing our network.
Yeah, and so obviously flexibility is built into the design, and you almost have to be like a Zen Buddhist, right? Just go and adapt to change quickly, be prepared to do it through whatever corporate processes you can put together.
Exactly. But at the same time, you've got to be judicious to say no. Because the amount of opportunity that comes your way when you have flexibility makes it rather challenging to focus your efforts. And that Zen Buddhist analogy is a pretty good one, saying so.
Well, see, I told you were wise. We're talking about Zen Buddhism here. Well, I mean, it's going to be a heck of a ride for you. I mean, I just really like what you guys are doing there, and wish you a lot of luck. And I look up to you, and I'm a lot older than you are. So yes, it has started.
Thanks so much for taking time to really appreciate it.
You bet. Well, that concludes this episode of Closing the Link and our series. I'd like to thank Mina Mitry of Kepler Communications. For more information, visit Kepler.space, and Kepler comms. This series is underwritten by Isotropic Systems. These podcasts are also brought to you by the 3,000 members of Space and Satellite Professionals International and our chapters worldwide. Thank you, SSPI. Additional support comes from our corporate partners. A programming note, in March, the Better Satellite World will launch Season 2 of our popular Space for All series. And we'll have a treat when we start Season 2 by talking to sci-fi actor and member of the hit The Expanse for 5 years, Cass Anvar. Cass and I get into some heavy issues about the future of space and humanity. Here's a clip.
I went through kind of an epiphany about human beings, I find, are one of the only species, if not the only species on the planet, that are incapable of finding a balance with their environment.
Right.
We're constantly behaving like the entity that we are now at odds with, which is a virus. Even bacteria will find equilibrium because our bodies are full of bacteria that balance. It's a symbiotic relationship. Every animal in the animal kingdom, every species in the world finds balance and equilibrium, except for human beings.
You can learn more about supporting this series by contacting us at sspi.org. Follow us on Twitter at SSPI and check us out on LinkedIn and Facebook and at bettersatelliteworld.com for all of our podcasts and videos. If you'd like to learn more about membership in SSPI, again, go to sspi.org. Student memberships are free. For Space and Satellite Professionals International, I'm Lou Zaccarella. For our producer, Ana Gomez, take care, everybody. Let's make it a better satellite world.